Joining me today on the Capital Show, Donald Bramer, former intelligence officer and chairman of Bramer Group. You are most welcome.
Thank you.
We're recording today from the University Club, and I'm glad that you are a member also. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. According to Access magazine, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell called the leaked draft Supreme Court opinion on Roe versus Wade an attack on the independence of the Supreme Court. Do you agree on that?
Absolutely. You know, in the history of the Supreme Court, we've never seen a leak of this nature, and it saddens me that we're now using the Supreme Court as a chess piece or a pawn in this political board game that we have here in Washington, using the justices to motivate and to establish your base politically is not what the court was set up to do. And now we're seeing, driving here today, I'm seeing riots and protests in front of the Supreme Court for something that hasn't even happened yet. This was a draft, a speculation, an internal document that should never been released, and it makes me wonder. We have, you know, a recent new appointee to the court, Judge Brown. Is this related, or is there some type of where the Democratic base is now using the Supreme Court to motivate voters?
So is it an escalation on the left group, another escalation from their side?
You know, I think that now, as McConnell would say, we're using the Supreme Court, we're attacking it. We're attacking the fundamentals of the court and taking away the integrity of the court by forcing the court to pick a side of Democrat or Republican when the court was established to be non-biased, non-political, to be the law of the land.
Is it related to the midterm elections somehow?
Absolutely. We're 187 days away from midterm elections, and what the Democrats are already seeing as an uphill battle. You know, we've been tracking midterm elections since 1856, and right now we've seen every midterm 18 times this has changed. This past week on Tuesday, we had primary races in both Indiana and Ohio. Every Republican candidate that was backed by the former president, President Trump, won in very high margins, and we're continuing to see that movement across the country. So Democrats know that it's an uphill battle. Right now you have more than 30 Democrat congressmen have already retired versus the 12 or 13 of the Republicans. So the numbers aren't in their favor, and this frightens them, especially the progressive side.
You have worked a lot, so hard to help the industries, American industries. Now we are heading toward an inflation or a recession, economic recession. What solution do we have?
You know, we're running, you know, we've been working with U.S. manufacturing for many years, for the past 10 years, and the supply chain issues that we're seeing coming out of the COVID pandemic, but even before that, with so many of the Asian countries, especially China, controlling our supply chain and using that as a leverage point, that in the end, while it's going to hurt now, it's going to focus that we start creating a supply chain that we can focus on, that we can have more leverage on, and it won't be just the United States. It's going to be the United States and our allies to create a supply base that we can depend on, and then we won't be used against us.
Another subject and very important topic: Elon Musk purchased the giant social media platform Twitter. What do you think about it? What is the purpose from this operation?
I think Elon is a very pragmatic but also an ideological person. He's someone that is not afraid to, as they say, the old phrase, put your money where your mouth is. He still says he's a Democrat, and he still says he supports President Obama. What he says he doesn't support is this control of free speech, this control of how we're allowed to think, what we're made to think. I think he's a person who has the ability and certainly the resources to do this. I hope and I'd like to think that he did this for the right reason, that everyone should have the ability to voice their opinion. And we're not always going to agree. That's the one thing that's awesome about this country.
What is the definition of this free speech?
What is the definition of free speech? Yeah, free speech is, you know, you should be able to have your opinion. I should be able to have mine. And we should be able to discuss it like adults and not get mad and pick up this log and throw it at you. You know, we should be able to say, you know, I respect your opinion, you respect mine, and just because we have a different of opinion does not mean we have to hate each other. And we've gotten away from that. And I think social media has, because you can hide behind a keyboard and you can be anybody you want to be. You can create fake profiles. So it gave people something to hide behind. And I think
which is bad, or
I think it's bad because there's no accountability, and it's okay to have a difference of opinion.
We hope that Elon Musk will deal with it, and he can keep his promise for freedom of speech. But question, is it a coincidence when we have in the same time or around a week after he purchased Twitter, a board of misleading information created or established by President Biden?
It's no coincidence at all. You know what it looks like? It looks like fear. And in my mind, for several years leading up to this, we've had a group of people who only wanted there to be one narrative. And we've seen this in the past with, if you disagree with me, then we block you, we ban you, we turn you off. So now that you can't use social media to do that, then you're going to rely on the government to do that. And what I think the Democrats are forgetting about right now, if you create this official office of disinformation, what happens when it's another party in there? Let's think about this long term. This is very Orwellian, and if you ever go back to a lot of the early books, 1984, where it talks about controlling information, this doesn't end well. It doesn't end in any book in any country that you've ever seen in the past. This never ends well. You take away the right of the First Amendment, and you try to control what people are allowed to think. It never works out in your favor. I'm truly optimistic that come when the Republicans take the majority back in November, that they'll look at this office of disinformation and defund it. Because what people don't realize is that Congress controls the purse strings. So that office, just because they create that office, it can be defunded and have no budget.
That's good to know. My question about Twitter again. Qatar is investing with Elon Musk in $375 million, and Qatar is like an Arab country, and it's known for its suppression of free speech. So how that can be managed? It's
kind of ironic, don't you think? Where does the priorities lie? And it's interesting you say that, look at all the investments that China makes, but then they don't hold the same principles in their own home country. So maybe there's an opportunity for Qatar to advance itself socially and politically. Only time will tell. But it does look right now where they're certainly looking to increase their investment portfolio.
Some said if Qatar owns part of Twitter through Musk ownership, no freedom of expression will be permitted through Twitter. Do you agree?
I think, in my opinion, at some point, Qatar may try to put limitations on Twitter in that country, but we already see that. We see limitations on Twitter across the globe, in Russia, in China. So I think we're in a circumstance where we could see more of that. I'm hoping that Elon will not give up his majority shareholder and try to fulfill his promise of freedom of speech across the world. Qatar
have ties with Iran, and there is fear if Qatar is there and Iran will have a control on this big platform and will have control of this big investment.
I don't know if they'll have control, but we have to remember
at least to be part of it.
It is a big part, but think for the past few years, while Twitter has been banning presidents, been banning Sean Hannity, Tucker. They've allowed the Taliban to have continued free speech. Khamenei. So, they've allowed what we deem as terrorists to continue to have a platform, and even allowed the leadership of ISIS to have a platform on Twitter. But yet you ban a president, you ban a TV producer because you don't like his opinion. What is the balance? I think that we just may see that everyone will have a fair shot, whether you agree, and this goes back to whether you agree or disagree. I find it interesting that in the last 2 weeks, how many people on the conservative side and the Republican side have seen their followers and their base increase in the large numbers that they have, which proves that all of this, there's been a limit on it. There's been a lock on how information was spread. If anything, I think that change will prove beneficial. But I think it'll even also open the doors for other social media platforms. And as we know, in this world and in every world, competition is good. You know, competition makes us be better, and sometimes that's what we need.
Let's go through your biography. You were deployed to Iraq as a veteran. Can you tell us, how do you see Iraq now in this time?
You know, I learned a lot about the Middle East in my time in the military, especially as an intelligence officer, and grew to have a very strong passion for that part of the world. You know, a lot of people don't see the beauty in the Middle East, and if you've ever written any of the old Lawrence of Arabia books, it's phenomenal. And you know, traveling through Turkey and Israel and Iraq, and, you know, what was then Persia, it's beautiful. And it was saddened to see so much of that area destroyed by war and combat. We have to understand, and I think a lot of Americans don't appreciate, that different cultures have different ways of governing themselves. And the American form of governing may not always work in every place in the world. What we should do is we should support free will. We should support investment, but realize that ours is not always the best way. It is the best way for us, and it is a great way here. But every culture is different, and when you have cultures who define their governance system based on their religious beliefs, you have to take that in
consideration.
Yes.
Tell me your opinion about the willingness of Biden administration to sign a deal concerning the nuclear program with Iran. Yeah, and how Iran now trying to influence the Middle East and they are sponsoring terrorism.
You know, years ago when President Obama made the original Iran deal, everyone knew that was a bad deal. We gave pallets and pallets of money, cash, and flew it to Iran, to Tehran. And that money did not go to the people of Iran, where it was supposed to go. Inflation was horrible, still is horrible in Iran. What we saw is a class of people in Iran who became very wealthy, and it was the clerics, it was the IRG. And we saw money tracing itself to support terrorism, going into Syria, going into Yemen.
Funding proxies like Houthis, Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yes. When we killed the Iran deal under President Trump, we started to see that rain of money start to dry up. Now with this promise from this administration to reinstitute the Iran deal, we're bringing Iran back up to a level where they feel they are a peer to the United States, and then we're going to see another increase in terrorism. You know, do we want to set Iran up so we see another Syria? And I fear that that's what will happen. You know, are we going to establish a funding train where, you know, ISIS is back as large as it was? ISIS, you know, was almost completely eliminated under President Trump. We have to find, you know, we can't keep funding terrorism, and I believe that's the Iran deal. By funding the pockets of, whether it's Iran, whether it's China, or whether it's North Korea, all that money comes back and goes to our adversaries, because we already know, you know, Venezuela, most of the debt that is owned by Venezuela is from Russia and China, you know, and even Iran has some of that debt. So we're giving opportunities and giving resources to invest in terrorism across the globe.
President Biden is gonna visit Israel. We heard this in the news, but there is no details why he chose Israel, and is it related to restore his relation or U.S. relationship with UAE, for example, after the failure to complete the F-35 deal?
So the F-35 deal is a strong multinational deal. There's a lot of countries that participate in that. Many of the clients that we support are part of the F-35. With a lot of things in this administration, this announcement that there's going to be a visit to Israel doesn't have a lot of plans to it yet. Doesn't have a substantial schedule or diary or even a date. So I think at this point it's nothing more than a gauge of political trust, or not trust, but what's the reaction going to be?
Any thought how to end this war, the Russian invasion to Ukraine?
It's funny you bring that up, because I was just thinking last night. President Putin is probably one of the most narcissistic, eccentric, egotistical people that we've ever seen in many lifetimes. So the only way that I see that he can walk away from this is in a way that he can save face. Saving face is easy in your own country when you control all the media. So that narrative, I mean, most Russian citizens believe they're winning the war in Ukraine. So he has to have a way to save face on this. The alternative to that is, and we'll go back several decades, and we remember when Russia invaded Afghanistan. Russia didn't finally make a decision to leave Afghanistan until the morale of its troops was low. The soldiers barely had socks for their feet. And
do you think that it's going to happen in Ukraine, the same scenario?
Yes, and the reason, but I think it's that conflict between Russia and Afghanistan took many years. I don't think that'll be the case here, because the world, the global stage, was not supporting the Taliban back then.
My last question, how do you see the future of Donald Trump, political future? Will he be running for election 2024?
I can't say whether he'll be running, but what I can show you,
party endorsing.
He is a force within the Republican Party. We saw this past Tuesday, and 22 candidates that he supported in both Indiana and Ohio all won. He is a continued force. Whether he runs, whether he anoints someone else to run, will be up to him. But what I think people need to realize, a lot of his popularity wasn't just created by him. A lot of his popularity continues to grow because of a lot of the actions that the Democrats are taking. Not as a Democratic Party, but even a very progressive, aggressive progressive party.
Donald Bramer, thank you so much. I appreciate your coming to my show, and nice to see you also, and wish you all the luck. And you are building your own studio, and you have Bramer Group, which is a successful company. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to spend my afternoon with you.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.